Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Day in the Life. Today, I'm joined by a friend of mine, Casey. She's a software developer, and I met her actually while we both interned at State Farm. And what was cool about that experience is we never met in person, but we worked together on a project virtually. And there's this area at the office called the Always On, and I felt like we would hang out there and either just be on a call together or chatting with each other. And it just felt like I actually knew her, even though we've never met in real life. But we have to change that sometime.
I agree.
Yeah. So she's now a software developer at State Farm after switching between different roles at State Farm. So super excited to talk to her and hear about that path of just changing roles. So welcome, Casey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So as I kind of mentioned, you've been at State Farm, but you haven't been doing the same thing at State Farm. So how'd you get to where you are now?
Oh my gosh, it's been a winding road. I graduated originally with a marketing degree, and I've actually held, if you count my internships, this is my fifth role at State Farm, which is totally crazy because I've only been there for like 4 years now. So I took kind of a journey in my internships, was in public affairs, doing like SharePoint development, which was super wacky. I worked with you in digital and ISD and did that for a summer. But when I started at State Farm, I started off in public affairs, kind of like a continuation of my last internship before I graduated. And it was very cool. I was doing more SharePoint stuff, more information architecture kind of stuff, and it was very interesting and a huge wild ride. We went through restructures and I got new managers, and I was only there for about like a year and a half, but it got to be crazy chaotic. So I was like, okay, I need something that's a little bit different. Gotta switch it up, get away from all of the restructures and the shuffling, because that just gets to be super overwhelming. And I ended up doing vendor management work as a risk and compliance analyst. So I had no background in risk and compliance, had basically no idea what I was going to be doing, but it had a lot of the soft skills. They needed a lot of the soft skills in the job that I had. And so I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot, see what's out there. So I switched over to doing that, and I loved it. It was a ton of fun. I ended up in the reporting space, and I was creating reports, doing access databases, and I thought it was pretty awesome. But I had always had in the back of my mind, what if I had tried more computer science classes in college? I took a couple, but our program was super small. And so I went to a really tiny school. So we didn't have an actual base of professors. It was like a rotating adjunct kind of idea. And so the curriculum was not probably where it should have been. And so I decided not to minor in it, but I kind of always regretted that. It was always in the back of my mind, you really liked this, maybe you should have given it a shot. So I decided to go back to school, and I started a graduate certificate program, which is half of a master's in information systems, and thought that was really awesome. And through some mentors at State Farm, I ended up finding a role as an entry-level developer over in our enterprise technology department. So I switched over there, probably about 7 months ago now, doing a job that I was probably unprepared for. And it was the most I've ever stepped out of my comfort zone in my entire life. And it was super scary, but now I am a developer. I'm in a really weird training. Oh, I guess it's not weird. It's really awesome. I'm in a training program sponsored by State Farm for the next couple months. I've been in it for about a month and a half now. Basically going through a code boot camp where 9 to 5, I have instructors and they teach us all there is to know about Java and JavaScript and React and Spring and all that stuff. So it's been a really awesome ride. I deal with a lot of imposter syndrome on a daily basis, but I'm learning to be more confident in myself and my skills and work on flexing my growth mindset.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, IBM loves saying that too, growth mindset.
Oh my gosh, I think it's the corporate buzzword right now. I see it everywhere. So I'm trying to just tell myself, that's what you're doing. You're learning how to do that.
Yeah. So are you working a full-time job in addition to this boot camp that you're doing, or how's that work?
No, it's actually amazing. It's basically I'm getting paid to only go to a boot camp. So I was on my team for a few months, and this opportunity came up. It's a brand new program that State Farm had spun up to basically give people a pathway to becoming a developer at State Farm. And so my manager was kind enough to let me jump on that opportunity. And it takes me away from my team for 22 weeks. But when I come back, obviously the goal is I've learned enough to jump in and get into the work right away.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that if it's through State Farm, you're learning all of the programming languages that you need for State Farm applications and software systems, which I see as the advantage of that, right?
Yeah. They're working with a vendor called Galvanize who like puts together all the material. But we cover a lot of Java because State Farm's a lot of heavy Java shop. And then we also are focusing on the front end, which I will never touch in my day-to-day job, but it's been really cool to learn. So it's been an awesome opportunity.
Yeah. So you're more on the back end side, I guess, in your current role. Is that
Java APIs.
Is that what you enjoy more? Or do you think you might eventually one day want to do like both or front end?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've been thinking about that a lot. I think it's tough because I'm very creative and there's something about the front end that I feel like naturally gravitates me more just because like you can take that like visual creativity, you can make it look the way you want to and experiment with something that someone actually sees, whereas like the code that I write in my typical job and the code that my coworkers write, no one ever like sees the end product. They just like use the service on the back end and they're like, oh cool, it works, it returns the JSON object. So it's never like, I don't know, something that I can experiment with in a way that other people would find like visually pleasing or exciting. And that has always drawn me. But there is something kind of addicting about the logic of a backend system and writing those pieces that stick together. And there's something like really, I mean, this sounds super cheesy, but like beautiful about how Java like comes together with the class files and the structure of things that I think is so satisfying, but maybe in a different way. So I have no idea what the future has. I would be happy trying anything, but right now I'm really loving Java. I'm liking the back end.
That's cool. I love how you described that like a puzzle and I could definitely see how it would be satisfying with how when you're bringing all of this together and like it works really fast. Like I feel like what with my dummy knowledge of programming is like back end is like if it performs really well then it's working. Like
yeah, yep. It's not too far off.
Yeah, well, actually, speaking of like dummy understanding of programming, how do you like explain what you do to people, and like how would you explain the difference between front end and back end to people who don't know about it?
That's a good question. So I would say front end is the visual representation of some sort of data, I guess. And so I don't work in front end much, so I don't know a whole ton about it, but that's what I would say is it kind of takes data and then presents it in some sort of visual format. Whereas what my team does on the back end is we handle the like retrieval and the manipulation of that data to hand it over to the front end that makes the display and makes it interactive for consumers and customers. So my team handles like our customer data, for example, like our APIs are called by front end services, by like the pretty websites, to retrieve information from a database, and then the front end projects it for the end user to see. So I feel like that's maybe, I don't know if I did a good job of explaining that, but that's like kind of how I see the differentiation.
Yeah, that makes sense to me anyway, but I work in IT, so I don't know. But hopefully that made sense to others. Yeah, cool. Like, so I guess, how do you explain what you do to say like, maybe like your grandma or like a figure like that?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I was just in a STEM panel at a junior high here. I'm trying to remember like how I described to them what I do. I would say that when someone clicks a button to like enter their phone number and they click save on their profile on the website, I have told the computer what to do with that phone number and where to store it. And if the customer ever needed to see it in the future to validate it, I told the computer how to give it back to them, to show it to them. That's like the most like basic understanding of what the code that my team writes does.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I like that explanation.
Makes it
So
sound really simple, but it's not that simple in practice.
sure. But it's helpful to have like an analogy of some sort.
Mhm.
Yeah, so specifically talking about your role, I know you're doing this like boot camp right now, but what are your like main responsibilities? We've kind of touched on it, but just to be more explicit.
Yeah, well, so we work on an agile team, and so there are four developers on my team now, and counting me. And so our responsibilities day to day are typically focused around like whatever tasks are on our storyboard for the week. And so our product owner, handles all of that behind the scenes stuff of choosing what features we're going to work on, or like, what we're going to work on for this time period. And then the developers, we typically have like one service that we're working on, or one like big feature that we're working on. And on a day-to-day basis, we just like pick up whatever piece of work is out there that we need to be working on next in order to finish this, whatever we're trying to do, enhancement of one of our APIs. We also simultaneously do all the service work. So with our model, we've kind of like smushed the development and the service together in like a DevOps kind of fashion, kind of. And so we handle all the service work. So anyone who wants to use our APIs throughout the company, or any other team who's having problems, we are the people like on the front lines who handle that as well. So we could be looking at the logs to make sure that everything's running well, keeping an eye on how all of our services are running. But we also handle like customer complaints, or if someone is saying, oh, your service is down, or I'm getting this error and I don't know why, we kind of have to pivot and then do that troubleshooting at the same time. So it's a lot of like context switching between writing code and then, oh, there's an emergency. Okay, let's go figure out what's going on there. And then, okay, back to my code. But yeah, those are the basic like groupings of things, I guess, that we're responsible for on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, nice. So like when I see this server is down, that would be your team.
It could be, yeah. That's like some of the stuff that we respond to, yeah. Except in our case, it's like services as opposed to servers, because we deploy our stuff onto our services, or our servers, but similar kind of idea.
Yeah, you have mentioned APIs a couple times. How do you explain that?
Oh my gosh, I'm not even really sure I understand them fully, to be honest, but it's basically a data retrieval method. So it's like a way of going into a data storage, like a database, and then pulling out the data that you want. And there's like a couple different solid methods that you use to do that, or different ways that you can interact with it. Like you could either just retrieve the data, or you could use an API to put data in somewhere, or delete data out of a database. But that's the main functionality, I would say, is retrieving data from somewhere, wherever that end thing is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Yeah, so kind of shifting gears a little bit, what made you decide to work at State Farm, and why do you stay there?
Oh man, what made me decide to work at State Farm? Well, the honest answer is they offered me a job, and it was for decent money. And I had just graduated, had applied to like maybe, I don't know, 80 companies, and had heard basically nothing, because I guess that's what the job search is nowadays. Like no one bothers responding to you to even tell you that you've been rejected. So I was feeling pretty down, but then State Farm came through and made me a very good offer. I had gotten like a couple really like lowball offers, like I don't think I can live on that salary kind of offers, but I felt like it was going to be a good fit for me to grow. I think the cool thing about working at a big company like State Farm is, oh my gosh, this is so cheesy, and I know for a fact you've heard this from so many people, that you can have like multiple careers at one company. You can, like I did, like you could totally switch gears and do something that's completely different in a whole other section of the company than you did before. And I feel like that's a uniquely awesome experience to get to like stretch yourself and challenge yourself, and never have to leave the company and worry about onboarding or offboarding and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a really cool opportunity. And plus, I mean, I grew up in Bloomington. State Farm's headquartered in Bloomington. You know, I'm a State Farm, like my family all works at State Farm now. So it's kind of like a generation thing. You know, you see a company treat your parents well, treat my sibling well, then it's just like, well, you know, it kind of gives you like the warm and fuzzies about like how your career there would be. So that probably factored into it too. As for why I'm staying, I don't think I would be given the opportunity that I have now to totally step outside my comfort zone and do something brand new. I don't know if I would be safe getting that somewhere else. I feel very supported and invested in as an employee, and I think that's a huge factor in like my loyalty right now and wanting to stick around.
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. We cannot answer this, but I just feel like I want to ask. And so like when you switch roles, does that affect your pay when you do that?
It depends. It can if you're switching like job classification. So I went from, in my old role as a risk and compliance analyst, I was professional technical, but I wasn't, I don't know how to explain this. We have, you know, different job classifications based on what you do, based on how like technical your job is, basically. And so my old job, not very technical. And so we were on a job class where the salaries were a little bit lower because, you know, like soft skills, while valuable, many people have. And when you're in a role that relies primarily on soft skills, you're not completely interchangeable, but the learning curve is not very steep if you find someone who has the soft skills. And so that's kind of reflected in the pay. When I switched roles, ironically, I got a 2-level demotion because I had gone from a senior risk and compliance analyst down to an entry-level developer. So I took 2 steps back, but I also got a raise at the same time. So even though I was like kind of far up in my promotion scale in my old job, switching over to a more technical role bumped my salary while being like, but you're a baby developer, you don't really know enough yet, so we can't pay you the big bucks. So it definitely can affect your salary, and in weird, unexpected ways like mine.
Yeah, that's a added perk, I guess.
Yeah, it was very, very bizarre. We're like, oh, you're getting a raise. And I was like, how? That makes no sense, but okay.
Yeah. So kind of going back to your like responsibilities question in a way, I do have a question around just what a day in the life is like for you and how has it changed due to the pandemic?
Oh my gosh. You know what's funny is I started my new role during the pandemic. So I have never been in the office. I've never met my coworkers. I've never met my manager in person. So it's been a little bit unique because before the pandemic, in the role that I was in, we were probably extremely collaborative. Like, I don't know if that's a good thing as I say that, but we had like meetings all the time and everybody was in person and we all sat in one little section of the floor and we were all together, which was good in its own way. But I'm a huge introvert. And so going to work from home was like a giant like breath of fresh air for me because we all say like bring our authentic self to work, but it is tough to always feel like you have to be on. I mean, you're interacting with other people as a professional. For me, that makes me feel like I have to be energetic and enthusiastic and ready to jump into conversation. Whereas when I'm at home, I'm not face to face with everyone. I can kind of like let my guard down a little bit, chill. I'm not constantly communicating and constantly hearing everyone's conversations around me. Like there are pros and cons to that, but I like how it has felt like I've been able to get some more calm in my day by being at home and being in my own space. And it's kind of interesting seeing how the collaboration has evolved, I guess, has changed. Granted, I've never been in person with any of my coworkers, so I don't know, like maybe in person it would be even smoother, but I have found that I've really enjoyed getting to know people virtually, and I still feel like I know them well and I'm able to communicate, but it's maybe even a little bit nicer because I sometimes could choose when I want to communicate and choose like what level of communication I want to have. Do I want to put my video on and interact with them more face to face, or do I just want to chat over IM and move on? So I kind of like that freedom to choose. For me, it's a little bit easier on my mentality.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
It's totally different, and I know that some people love it and some people hate it, but I'd say I'm more on the love section of how things have changed.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, what do you do outside of work to decompress?
I really like to be outside. So I'm like a huge nature girl. So I love hiking, like anywhere I could go. My husband and I hike all the time. Whenever the weather is nice enough in Illinois. And we kayak sometimes and try and spend some time out in the water, which is really fun. But I'm also a foster parent for a shelter in town. And so right now I have a couple cats, and we used to foster dogs almost exclusively, but now we have switched to cats, and we have found that it's very fun. And I never thought I'd be a cat person, but I don't know, they're kind of growing on me. So we do that, and we spend a lot of time outside and a lot of time on walks, and getting my body moving after sitting all day is something that I love.
And super healthy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, that's great. That's something I have to intentionally try to just make part of my day, is just
Yeah,
to get moving, because it's not good to just be sitting all day, as I've learned.
that's so true.
And yeah, so speaking of your husband, how did you meet?
Oh, we met on Bumble actually. It was really weird. I have no idea why I joined the dating app in the first place. It's like totally not my style, but he was one of the first people that I matched with. We started talking, and then like a few days later, went on a date, and then I never went back on the app. And so ever since then, we have been together. It's been about three and some change years since we met. So we met just randomly on Bumble.
That like never works out. I'm so happy for you that it was like that, as
I
somebody who's
know.
used dating apps before, and you're like, oh, everybody's terrible. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, to be fair, the only time I went on the app after we like started communicating was to communicate with him, like until we had exchanged numbers. So I had a very short-lived, like maybe 1 or 2 days on Bumble looking at people, and then I just didn't interact with anybody else.
That's
I got
great.
very lucky.
Yeah. And you mentioned to me before you had a pandemic wedding. So what was that like?
Oh my gosh, stressful. Yeah, it was very stressful. We didn't want to have a traditional wedding per se off the bat. We were actually planning on getting married out in the Grand Tetons in Wyoming, and my family was going to be there, and it was going to be, romantic and pretty. We had everything picked out, the photographer, like the place we were going to get married. Bought my dress for that wedding because in May, yeah, in May in the mountains, it's not very warm. So like I bought all the stuff for this wedding. And then a month before we were supposed to fly out, our permit got canceled. So we had been waiting and waiting. Everything got shut down that summer, that in 2020. And we were like, okay, well, they haven't canceled anything. We still got our wedding permit. Like everything could be fine next year. And then oh gosh, yeah. And then what was it? 4 weeks before our flight, they called me and said, your wedding permit has been canceled. And we were like, are you serious? So all the parks had shut down at that point, but they were saying, okay, we'll reopen in time for the wedding. It'll be fine. But that did not happen. And so 4 weeks out, we were like, what the heck are we going to do? And we wasted, I guess, few weeks of our precious time until the wedding date, deciding like, do we push off the wedding? Do we postpone until like maybe next year and hope that it's better? Or do we come up with some like other plan to do in the meantime? And ultimately we decided we didn't want to wait any longer. Like, I don't know, we'd only been engaged like 8 months, but for us that was already too long. So we were really anxious to get married. We had like really had our hearts set on getting married on that day. And so we ended up getting married in my parents' living room. My mom and I planned like this whole, not very fancy little ceremony in 2 weeks, bought all of this decorations and stuff, practiced. My dad got ordained so that he could marry us because we couldn't get a pastor to do it. It was totally crazy. And up until like a week before, we didn't even know if we were going to get a marriage license because all the county buildings were closed. And so my mom worked her magic somehow and got them to agree to meet us outside of the building to give us a marriage license. So it was like an insane wild ride. Of course, that also meant that our honeymoon was canceled because we were supposed to go honeymoon in the Tetons and in Yellowstone. And when the parks closed, that was not going to happen. So we honeymooned in Bloomington and got a hotel and hung out in Bloomington, Illinois, which was not exactly what we intended, but it was a fun story. And I don't know, I think like that kind of creates some sort of connection with other people who kind of went through the same thing and like had this thing that you were really looking forward to and been planning for a long time kind of like fall apart and try and figure out like what's more important, getting married, or like does the ceremony, is that what's important to us? And either way is totally fine, but for us it was, no, it's, we want to get married, we can wait for the cool stuff until our 1-year anniversary. So that's what we did.
Yeah, because there's more to marriage than the wedding, even though like a lot of, I don't know, stuff that's marketed towards us is like about, oh, the wedding is the thing. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sad you had to change your wedding plans, but I'm glad you had like, it sounds like a really yeah, I don't know, like a cool family experience that you put together.
Yeah, it was really special, and I'm really glad that it turned out the way it did. I mean, it was like 90 degrees and I was in a long sleeve wedding dress, so that was a little bit of a bummer, but it was a very unique experience that like, I mean, it's a once in a, I don't know, yeah, hopefully once in a lifetime opportunity to have my dad like marry me. That was so special. And like my grandpa was able to walk me down the aisle, and he wouldn't have been able to have come if we had eloped destination wedding like we had planned. So yeah, it was definitely meant to be, and it all worked out perfect, but it was a bit of a wild ride getting there.
Yeah. And now that you're married, what do you feel like has changed?
Um, Basically nothing. I don't know. I actually worried about this for a long time after I got married. Like, it's supposed to feel like super different, and like my life is supposed to be so different now. And it's like, I don't know, nothing's different. We had lived together before we got married. So I mean, I went back to the same apartment, the same jobs, you know, nothing astronomical had happened. It's just I don't know, a little bit freeing, I guess, to have like a life partner and someone who has made a vow in front of other people to like support you forever. So I definitely love that part of our relationship. But I don't know, we were always very sure once we started dating, very shortly after we started dating, that like this was the right relationship for us and this is like what we wanted for the rest of our lives. So it definitely is special in that regard, that I get to spend every day with him and know that it's not ending.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so talking about like being a foster parent to cats and dogs, how does that process work?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna open my blinds a little bit. It's a little dark, but so it's a very special process. And I think it takes a special person willing to kind of like open themselves up to the, I don't know, pain, I guess, of like having this bond with an animal and then giving them off to their like forever parents. But we take in dogs who come into shelters, or now cats who come into shelters, and typically they have had bad experiences one way or another, whether that was like they were strays or they were abandoned, or we had a dog who was pretty severely abused at one point. And you take them into your home and you feed them and try and love them and teach them how to be with a human and in a home environment. And then you wait for someone to come along and say that they want to adopt them. And then you give them over to them and you say bye, and then you move on to the next one. So it has been a huge, I don't know, bright spot in my life, I guess, because I love having the animals with us when they're here. And I love taking care of them. We have a kitten right now. Actually, my husband's going to bring her over because she's just so cute. We have a kitten right now, and her name is Squirt. And here's little Squirt. Say hello. Hi. And she's 2 months old, and she's got some problems. And she came in and she was doing real bad. She's still underweight. So we're working on like feeding her. She takes 4 medications twice a day. So it's a lot of work, and it's hard because a lot of these animals have like issues. I mean, they didn't end up in the shelter for no reason typically. So it's definitely challenging, and you have to have a lot of compassion and patience for the animals, but it is really rewarding to see them happy with their family. Like we still get updates about one of the dogs we fostered like 3 animals ago with his new family, and he's just like living his best life, and they love him so much. And so like seeing them in this amazing situation with like parents who love them and a family that loves them, like totally makes it all worth it, because you're like, oh, I helped you be okay with people and other dogs and potty train, and now you have the perfect situation, and it's just awesome to see.
Oh, what kind of like behavioral issues have you had to deal with in the past?
Well, we've had dogs who are not potty trained at all. This kitten was not litter box trained either, so we're still working on that. We've had dogs who hate other dogs, like hate other dogs, and that has been challenging because we live in an apartment and we have to take them outside where other dogs often are. So that has been a unique challenge. One of the dogs we had was so afraid that like when we first got him, he would not come out of his kennel. He was like absolutely terrified. We called him the conundrum dog because he was like a gigantic conundrum. He wanted love so bad but had absolutely no idea how to express himself, and he was so terrified of you that like he would come up to you and say love me, and so you'd reach down to pet him, and then he'd like sprint with his tail down away from you because he was so afraid. So we haven't had any dogs who are aggressive, because I don't know. That's kind of like where I draw my line, I guess. I don't think I'm quite equipped to handle or like train a dog who has issues with aggression towards humans. But we've had dogs who are food aggressive and toy aggressive. So they'll growl or snap if they have a toy and you want to take their toy. But we struggle with separation anxiety a lot. A lot of the dogs that we've had, once they form like an attachment to you, cannot bear to be without you, and that's tough for us because we're in an apartment, so the howling and the barking and the crying is a very tough one to deal with. So that one is the biggest challenge for us for sure.
Yeah, and what made you decide to switch to cats?
Well, we had a dog who had pretty bad separation anxiety and would just howl his head off when we were gone. He is now adopted, living with his forever family now and doing very well. But with us, it was a little bit of a challenge. And at the end of having him, we sat down and said, well, we love doing this, but it's really stressful to have animals who unknowingly could be like jeopardizing our future in our apartment. The last thing you want is for your neighbors to be annoyed that you have a dog that's barking. And so we decided like maybe it was time to try something that would be a little bit better of a fit with our lifestyle. Like we're super active, so that's great to have a dog, but we also like to keep our own schedule. And once I'm like on a schedule, I'm pretty committed to it. And so having to totally shift the way that we did things to sit with a dog who has separation anxiety was another big stressor. And so we figured cats could fit our lifestyle better in that regard, where they don't care as much if you're there or not. They just like want you when they want you, and then they'll leave you alone otherwise. So we tested that out. Our first cat was a 3-month-old kitten who got adopted last week. Yeah, or something like that. Last week, I think. And it was such a great experience, and he was so precious that we couldn't pass up the opportunity to do it again. And now we have these two.
Oh, I'm a cat person, but my family always has had dogs. So like I like both, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 cats. So I'm like, oh,
That's awesome. Yeah, we're definitely getting on the cat train now. They are a totally different animal than dogs. So it's been a bit of a learning experience trying to understand like how they express what they need and how to give them affection. It's just definitely not the same as a dog. So that's been a learning curve for sure.
Definitely, yeah. Um, between cats, it's different too. Both the cats I have are very different in how they express affection, and I've learned that they get jealous of each other too.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, you have to like, so I have to be sensitive to the one who doesn't want to come and be like outwardly affectionate, but he still wants attention, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute.
So my last question is around just like being in Bloomington, which is where did you grow up there, and do you think you'll stay
Yeah.
there? Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes. I have been in Bloomington for all 25 years of my life, and I do not intend to stay here at the end of the day. For a long time, I thought it wouldn't really matter where I lived. Like growing up and in college, I was like, as long as I have a job and I can travel, I'm good. I don't feel like that's the case anymore. I don't know if it's the pandemic or just like growing up and becoming an adult in general, but I started to like crave the new experiences and like having a new adventure. And I just have kind of run out of opportunities in Bloomington to experience something that's like truly new and kind of put myself in a totally different environment and experience than I've had before. So our plan is to move. My husband is going to finish his computer science bachelor's in December. And the plan is like where he gets a job, we will move, and we'll see how that ends up with my job and whether or not I can keep it. But we're pretty excited to try something new and get out and kind of like start a life in a new space together and explore what that means for us and what that looks like.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thanks so much, Casey, for joining me on the show. It's been really great catching up with you. Lots of good conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single show. Interested in being on the show? Know someone that might be a good fit? Use the nomination form in the description.